Because remember, their share was a little bit lower in cable and lower still in broadcast. Blacks are actually underrepresented in digital, unlike in the other arenas where they were either at proportionate representation or overrepresented, and all other groups are underrepresented. If we look at digital leads by gender, again, it looks kind of similar to what we saw in cable. Women are inching up towards parity with men. By 2015-16, they were at 43.1%. Now we start looking behind the camera. We start looking at show creators. And this role is important, of course, because these are the people who pitch the idea or have the idea for the show. In some cases, they may become the showrunner, maybe not, but certainly the idea kind of originates with them. And that sets in motion, of course, a chain of events that impact casting, story writing, probably what's going to happen in the writer's room and everything else. So the question here is, what do broadcast show creators look like by race? Well, 95.8% were white in 2011-12, down to 92.9% in 2015-16. And you don't see a lot of action. I mean, I guess there is some improvement, but not much. And you can see we're well below the white line. In fact, people of color would have to multiply their share by greater than 5 to reach proportional representation among show creators. So again, the takeaway here is that to the extent that there's been some progress, most of it's been in front of the camera, not as much behind the camera. Certainly not with respect to this important position. If you look at women broadcast show creators, women have actually gone backwards since we started doing the study. Men were 73.5% of the show creators, broadcast show creators in 2011-12, up to 77.9% in 2015-16. If you look at cable, again, no change, pretty much flat. No advancement at all for people of color among show creators in cable. They'd have to multiply their share by nearly 5 to reach proportionate representation in cable. Women, again, they went backwards in cable among show creators. 16.9% in 2015-16 compared to 21.5% we saw in 2011-12. Now, if you look at digital, we actually see some pretty significant increase by race. People of color were 6.2% of the show creators in 2013-14. Again, we have fewer years here because of the number of shows that were available, but up to 15.7% by 2015-16. They more than doubled in that 3-year period. And the corresponding line for white show creators in digital declined. And here you see the population line, so people of color would have to a little bit more than double their share to reach proportionate representation. What about women in digital? Again, a similar pattern. Women have made progress in digital as well. So some interesting stuff going on in digital. We know that Netflix is making more original programming than any other platform right now, and it bears watching sort of how that's going to impact diversity and inclusion in front of and behind the camera in digital in the coming years. So the takeaway for us for the report, the key takeaway is what all of this I've just shown you has to do with the bottom line. All right? So this first chart is attempting to show you the relationship between the diversity of the cast for the top theatrical films in 2016 by what they do at the box office. And essentially what we do for each of the charts like this is we take all of the films or TV shows that you're going to see in a minute, and we divide them into buckets based on the overall diversity of the top 8 actors, the top 8 credited actors in the cast. Movies in this case that are 11% minority or less, from 11 to 20% minority, 21 to 30, 31 to 40, 41 to 50, and 51 and over. In other words, majority minority cast. And we ask, on average, what does a film in that category do at the box office? And so what we're looking for is where box office peaks. That is to say, which diversity interval tends to produce the highest box office. All right? So what we find in 2016, which is very similar to what we saw last year and more or less in every year that we've done this study, is that films that have casts that look more like America in terms of diversity of the cast, on average, do the best. Now, of course, there are examples of films that aren't very diverse that do well, and films that are very diverse that bomb. But we're talking about all films and what the tendency is and what the average film does. And what we see year in, year out, is that films that are at least 21% minority do the best in terms of median box office. And this is global box office, which we'll come back to in a minute because we're very interested in the global market. So films that occupied the peak interval in 2016 were films like Zootopia, Doctor Strange, and Ghostbusters 2016. Here's a chart from the actual report that we titled Business as Usual. It shows that movies with casts that were 20% minority or less made up a majority of all movies in 2016 and had the lowest global box office. So again, we have an interesting sort of contradictory sort of practice going on here where they're making lots and lots of films that aren't diverse that are bombing at the box office. All right, so we'll return to that. In fact, we'll talk about that in the Q&A. This chart from the report shows you the power of people, or people of color, in terms of theatrical films. This is a ranking of the top 10 films by box office, and you can see that Captain America Civil War made $1.15 billion in the global box office in 2016. The films that are highlighted in yellow are films where people of color bought the majority of the tickets. So for 5 of the top 10 films, people of color bought the majority of the tickets, and you have the percentages there in the table. Moreover, for 2 additional films, people of color bought half the tickets. So for 7 of the top 10 films, people of color either bought half the tickets or most of the tickets for those movies. Wow. Right? Again, a trend that we've seen in previous years. Last year was also 5 of the top 10 films. I think the previous year was 4 of the top 10 films. So remember, the population is getting 0.5% more diverse each year. So we expect the trend to continue in that direction. This chart takes us into broadcast scripted television and gives us a look at essentially the way in which ratings are related to the diversity of the cast. Pretty much the same analysis we looked at for film, but now we're looking at broadcast, and instead of box office, we're talking about ratings. And again, the question is, where do ratings peak for broadcast scripted shows? What diversity interval in terms of the cast? And here we're talking about median 18 to 49 viewers. Ratings, median ratings for 18 to 49 viewers. And again, the same interval, 21 to 30. And you can see that the 51 and over is a close contender. In other words, majority minority cast broadcast shows are really close in terms of overall median ratings to shows that were in the 21 to 30% interval. And again, this finding is very consistent with what we've seen every single year. In fact, earlier years, 31 to 40 was the top interval. And I think the only reason why it wasn't the top interval this year is that the 51 and over siphoned some of the, some of the viewers or some of the shows in terms of ratings from what would have been the peak. And so 19 shows fell into this interval in 2015-16. Shows like Chicago PD on NBC, Gotham on Fox, Legends of Tomorrow on the CW, Scandal on ABC. And note that only about 30% of the broadcast scripted shows in 2015-16 had casts that were 20% minority or less compared to nearly half a season earlier. So there's been some progress in broadcast with respect to what they're actually making with show diversity. This chart presents the same type of analysis with Nielsen's social media ratings, the Twitter rating. And here we find the same thing. The top interval is 21 to 30, and a close contender is 31 to 40. And we know the shows that fell into this interval. The reason why this measure is important because it gives us a sense of social engagement with a show, which in some ways may be more important than the conventional ratings with the way people view television these days. Again, people of color power, we have broadcast scripted shows, and so these are the top 10 broadcast scripted shows among persons 18 to 49 for the 2015-16 season. 6 of the top 10 shows among viewers 18 to 49 had casts that were at least 21% minority. And you can see them there. Empire, far and away the #1 show. We also in the report have breakdowns by different household demographics for the top 10, and there's some important differences, but there are also some similarities in terms of the importance that diversity plays for every household demographic. This chart shows us ratings by minority cast share for cable scripted, the same analysis we did for broadcast. And again, we're asking, where do the median 18 to 49 viewer ratings peak? Well, in cable, it's 31 to 40, shows that are 31 to 40% minority. All right, and 20 shows fell into this peak interval in 2015-16. Shows including American Crime Story, FX, Into the Badlands, AMC, Suits, USA, and Luther, BBC American. Median ratings for Asian, Latino, and white households also peaked in this cast diversity interval. Meanwhile, median ratings for African American households peaked with cable shows that had casts that were majority minority. So, you know, taking into account those Oprah Winfrey Network shows, BET, TV One, etc. In fact, the ratings for African Americans were off the charts for those shows. We don't have time to kind of look at the different breakdowns by household demographic, but they're pretty remarkable when you look at them. And like we did for like we did for the conventional ratings, we also look at social media ratings for cable. We look at tweets by minority cast share. And what we see here is that, again, tweets also peak in the same interval, 31 to 40% minority cast. All right, so this is the actual report. It's available for download at this address, socialsciences.ucla.edu. It has about 120 tables and charts. It's a lot of data. I just showed you a piece of it. And a lot more explanation, but hopefully this will get discussion started. Thank you.